Woody Marshall, General Partner at Technology Crossover Ventures. Thank you very much for joining us here at PhocusWire today. Pleasure to be able to talk to you.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks, Woody. So can you give us a sense, first of all, what is TCV's approach to company selection when it comes to investment opportunities? Big picture kind of question, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, just to set the stage, TCV is a growth equity firm. We've been around for 26 years doing the same thing. All we invest in is technology and at the growth stage. So for us, that means companies that have reached some level of commercial acceptance. And as I said, we've been at it for 26 years, invested in over 350 companies. I think when you think about kind of company selection for us, the first thing is we're very thematic. So again, everything is in the realm of technology, but there are a number of, probably at any point in time, we probably have 20 to 30 themes that we're pursuing. Internet travel and the disruption of travel in general is one I'm sure that we'll talk about. But fundamentally, we get thematic. We understand what the drivers are. We pick what we think are some of the best companies, and then we build relationships with those companies over time. And when you look at what we look for in companies, obviously the theme is indicative of what we think is an attractive market. And then you're looking for a company that we think has a differentiated product or service, and then a management team that is very product focused. And we think that over time can either maintain or extend the differentiation around that product. And if you have all of those, that usually is a good start for a company that we're going to be interested in.
Now, so much of the focus around startups is about them raising money, but you as Technology Crossover Ventures have to do the same. So you closed a $4 billion fund to support your own investment activities in the future. How do you actually set about creating a strategy? And what types of sectors will you target when a new fund is secured?
Yeah. So earlier this year, as you said, we closed TCV 11, which was $4 billion. And one of the things that I think is great about us is if you looked at the TCV 1 fund document, which talked about focusing on franchise companies in technology. And again, crossover for us means that we have some public activity. A lot of it means that when a company goes public, we don't necessarily look to sell immediately. Yep. We'll hold on to something as long as it's on the path for the kind of growth trajectory that we expected. But we've actually done the same thing for 26 years through 11 funds. So the strategy has not changed. Obviously, as technology has gotten bigger and more part of everyday life, the opportunities not only have gotten larger, but the companies have gotten bigger, the financings have gotten larger. So our first fund was $100 million, and our 11th fund, as you said, is $4 billion. Oh, yeah. But for us, the strategy is, again, what I mentioned a little bit before. It's growth equity focused exclusively in technology. And look, we've had great long-term investors. If you look at technology, it's one of the true growth industries. The secular tailwinds have not changed. Anything that for us, if you broadly look at it, it's find an analog process that's going to move digitally, right? That covers a lot. Now, whether that's on the consumer side or whether that's on the business to business side, just think of how you did things 15, 20 years ago. Whether you were listening to music through a CD or watching a movie on a DVD, today that's all streaming. Whether you used to call a travel agent to get a hotel reservation or a plane flight, and now you just pick up your phone. Like all of those things are encapsulated in the world of technology and the themes that we're pursuing.
And I suppose it's interesting if we reference back to 15 years ago. Many people did book alternative accommodation on platforms, but there was one brand in particular that you famously backed, and that's Airbnb. That really is probably one of the most kind of needle-moving brands of the last 20 years, alongside perhaps say Uber in ground transportation. Can you talk us through how that relationship with Airbnb and the co-founders there was formed? And I think perhaps more interestingly, how it's evolved since, because they have, as we all know, it's a year on since they went public.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually going to step back because, when you think about alternative accommodations, it actually is a good case study for the TCV history in travel. Mm-hmm. So one of the first investments that we made in the mid 1990s was a business called Vacation Spot, which was one of the first search engines and listing sites for alternative accommodations. And that ended up getting bought by a business that was being built inside of Microsoft called Expedia. Mm-hmm. That opened up a very long-term relationship between TCV and the Expedia team. Most notably, Rich Barton, who is after his Expedia success has gone on to have a successful next chapter at Zillow. We are Zillow investors. And there's a number of, Expedia execs that we have been close to over time, whether, it's Rich or Eric Blatchford, who was the founding chief marketing officer, Simon Breakwell, who ran international, Barney Hartford, who then, we brought into Orbitz. Like, this was the beginning. We were, this was obviously the investment strategy at that time was internet travel was so underpenetrated. You were just playing the theme of what's the penetration of more people that are going to use, at the time it was the web, obviously now it's mobile, to book travel. And Expedia became, one of our, first, home runs, and, certainly one in the, in the travel space. And, since then we've been looking at things that, that have, created real value for both consumers and, travel suppliers alike. The next investment that we made in the, that's relevant in and around the alternative accommodations was actually not Airbnb, it was HomeAway. We were invested in HomeAway before. And, HomeAway was, it digitized the current experience that was, available. If you looked, you walk out of your, grocery store in a vacation community, there was the rack that had, the cars for sale, the boats for sale, and then, maybe real estate for sale, and then properties for, rent. And HomeAway was the first company that put that online. And they grew through consolidating a bunch of, disparate businesses, globally. And, very successful investment for us, again, sold into Expedia. And I think we learned, some interesting, lessons there. HomeAway was, making an existing business more efficient, both for the consumer and for the, for the host. But they had all of the, the friction of people, people had rented vacation properties before, folks that owned properties had rented them before in many ways to, through property managers and the, and the like. So that didn't allow them to be, I think, totally disruptive and rethink, the consumer experience. And that's kind of where Airbnb stepped in, because if you think about the initial market that, that was very attractive to them was, not whole house. A lot of it was in the cities. It was focused, more on, millennials. So it was not the classic vacation rental, property. And what Airbnb did off of that was, build this really magical experience around the consumer side, right? If you remember, the frustration that folks had with VRBO was you were interested in a property, you would send an email. And if the host or owner had a booking, a lot of times they didn't get back to you. Which can be frustrating, right? And but that was the way that the world worked. And Airbnb built this kind of, I wouldn't call it real time, but a more robust communication platform that allowed them, Airbnb, to make sure that people were responsive. Because if you weren't responsive, you were going to get dinged, and it was it wasn't a positive consumer experience. And as a result of that, they amassed a, significant, consumer base. And over time, they've been able to move that from, the one room to whole house. They've certainly benefited in the pandemic, which, I think the vast majority or a big chunk of their transactions, as they talk about today, are in vacation communities. But it was, again, it's the continued evolution. In travel, you need to understand where the market was, because there is friction, and if you can make improvements, and by the way, like, what a great way to do that is to have tremendous consumer love. I mean, if you look at Airbnb, the things that are, I think, remarkable about that business is, they have a great product, huge organic acquisition and engagement, all based on, being very product focused. I mean, I would argue today it's the only travel app that I would define as a home screen app, right? I bet if you look at people's phones, you won't see any other travel app, on
that's a good point.
On the home screen. And you think about the opportunity that they have to, be more impactful in people's lives. Right now it's around lodging and experiences, but you have all that data, where people are going. I think that's an interesting gateway. And, when we invested, and again, it was after, we sold to HomeAway, because, there were the view of conflicts before that, but a lot of our experience was around, the more of the vacation, property part of the, the business, which I think is core, to any offering. And look, I think the Airbnb team has done, a remarkable job. I mean, you think about what anybody in travel has gone through over the last 18 months. And, this is a company that has a very supportive and tight culture to have to let go as many team members as they did, and then, scramble as you have to build back up. That's really hard from an execution standpoint. And I take my hat off to Brian and the rest of the team there. And I think he did that. What got him where he is today is what got him, to where he was, pre-pandemic, which was being very customer, centric. And by the way, he had an acknowledgement that his customer was both the traveler as well as the host. It's a great story for a lot of things. And for us, it's just been the continuation of what we've seen in the travel space in the 20 plus years that we've been investing in in internet travel. I mean, at the end of the day, the best product wins. And
always,
that's about content. They have differentiated content, but it's also about user experience, taking the friction out of a process, which sometimes can be very frustrating.
As well as famously backing Airbnb. I mean, TCV is well known for its kind of commitment to the portfolio companies that it has for the long term, which I think is a very interesting kind of differentiator between you and others. I mean, would you kind of establish and nurture and maintain that kind of relationship with the executive teams once you've decided that you are going to support them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, every company is, different. There are some companies that, are interested in more of engagement, and others are not. We're probably on the board of probably 9 out of every 10 companies that we invest in. We're not, in the Airbnb case, but certainly, close to many of the executives in terms of helping them with insights, make better decisions, faster. Like, at the end of the day, the way that we view ourselves is, as an accelerator, right? Yeah. A founder, a management team, runs into questions all the time about what they should do. We're certainly not going to make the call for them, but what we can do, especially when you have a portfolio, including the past portfolio of 350 companies you've invested in, you've probably seen something similar before. So why not connect that, manager and executive with someone that's been through that before? And, we have a stable of advisors that, work with our portfolio in formal and informal ways, right? That includes everything from, Barry McCarthy, the old CFO from Netflix, who, he was integral when we made our Spotify investment. He became the CFO of Spotify. After he retired, he's back as an executive advisor. I mentioned Eric Blatchford earlier, who is the founding chief marketing officer of Expedia, and then took over Expedia as the CEO when it was owned by Barry Diller. You're talking about folks like Eric. Knows more about internet travel than he's probably actually forgotten more about internet travel than most people will know. So folks like that. You have practitioners in areas like marketing. Kelly Bennett, who is the former CMO of Netflix. We just brought on a woman named Jessica Neal, who is the Netflix chief talent officer. Again, you're seeing some trends here, but like for us, the folks that are most impactful are actually people that have executed growth at scale, because I think that's what companies want some help in. And it's somebody that's done it at scale is important. And for example, after Greg really left Airbnb, Greg now spends time with us as an executive, advisor. So, I think the way that we think about it is, how can we be helpful? We've seen a lot, but we also have a network of folks that have been through some of the same problems before. And if we can help a company make a better decision faster, then that's what we've done. And that's
it's almost like a community within TCV itself.
Absolutely.
Interestingly, you back both private and public companies. So, with many digital travel brands that have, now listed on the public market, certainly over the last, 5 to 10 years, how do you kind of evaluate and consider which business to invest in after they've gone public? Because it's a different kind of investment, or not.
It is, it might be just because, again, if you want to buy, you can, just call your broker and buy some stock. I mean, in some cases we'll do a negotiated transaction. We've done, we in the past, we did a convert in Netflix in 2011 when the market didn't like their decision to kind of split the business up into the DVD business and the streaming business. And we thought the market made a very short-term decision. It turned out we were correct. But, I think the opportunity, first of all, on the public side is if you think about a private company, you can focus on the long term, right?
Yeah.
If you have like-minded investors. And, there's not somebody that's, evaluating how you're doing on a day-to-day basis, like a public company, and the representation of that, their value is your stock price. And, this happens all the time where, an announcement, a quarterly report, the market says, I'm done. I don't trust this, something's wrong. And, there's a shock to the system in a particular price. And our point of view is, if you haven't changed your long-term perspective, this is a great entry point. So, when we look at the world on a thematic basis, we look at the public companies as well. Now, granted, it's 90+% of what we do is in the private market. But there, we have some companies, that we've been invested in for a long period of time. I mean, Netflix is, over 20 years of investment. Actually, if you look at the dollars deployed, we've invested more dollars since the company's been public than when it was private. Same can be said about, Zillow, which is another, more than a decade, involvement with the company. So, there are definitely differences, but our viewpoint is the same, which is, do you like a market? Do you, like what a company is doing? Do you believe in the management team? And then, I think the public market, can often make a short-term decision, which is, which provides a significant opportunity for the long-term investor. And our view is we will take advantage of that. And it's the same way as when we take a company public, we don't look to get liquidity quickly, because what got you excited about the business, the long-term growth, the differentiation, the quality of the management. Just because a company goes public doesn't change anything. So that's kind of what's been core for at least our definition of growth equity. And again, as we like to say, crossovers our middle name, right? TCV. Yeah. So that's been something we've done from the beginning, and we continue to do that.
And just briefly, I mean, on that subject, are there any, can you share with us, are there any fundamental differences in the relationship between you as the investor and the company when it's a public versus a private company, or do you feel that you still have the same type of relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. If you're on the board of a public company, you're an advisor and involved in strategy. If you're not on the board, we don't have any, differentiated insight in that, in that case. But at the end of the day, we don't view our role any differently with a public company as with a private company. If we can be helpful as a company is executing on its growth plan, whether it's public or private, we're here as a resource.
Yeah. Okay. Interestingly. So, Woody, let's move on a little bit. Would you agree? Some people may, some people may not. But would you agree that the chances of an Airbnb level consumer-facing travel business emerging are actually narrowing? Those chances are narrowing, and instead, the bigger fish to pull out of the lake are actually going to be pure play tech providers. Those are going to be the ones that are going to kind of win innovation in the travel sector next.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if you looked at everything today, you would probably say logically, yeah, feels like the game on the consumer is over. I think that just presupposes that you have solid execution by the players that are there today, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, and especially with a consumer business, if you don't provide the right service to the customer, somebody else will. Now, yes, we're pretty confident, because if you look at the pace of product innovation at Airbnb, I mean, just look at what they've been able to accomplish in the last year. It's been kind of remarkable in terms of value for both hosts and travelers. So I think the answer is yes, but I don't think that. I think it requires thoughtful execution, because I think there's a lot of history of companies that got complacent, and then someone else came in and changed the dynamic. I mean, again, if you look at platform shifts, the move from analog to digital, massive platform shift, people got displaced. Same thing with mobile. Will the metaverse do the same thing? I don't know. But by the way, if you're an existing player and you're not thinking about it, you might be making a very, in hindsight, a short-term decision.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, certainly here in the UK, where I'm based, the online travel agencies at the turn of 2000 or so, we think of eBookers and Apodo, who were going to lead the way, and they were soon swept aside by those, as you said, Woody, kind of executed better and thought about the customer as the number one priority. So, and let's talk a little bit about the last 2 years, if we're allowed to. I know it's a lot has happened, but how do you work alongside your portfolio businesses during this period? Is it strategic? Is it financial? Is it operational? Or is it even something fairly flaky like moral support? I mean, how do you support your founders during the good and the tough times?
Yeah, I don't think moral support is flaky at all. I think being
it's hard to measure. I think.
Yeah, but I'm just saying I think being a founder can be a remarkably lonely place. And if you were a founder in travel, a CEO in travel, March of 2020, when everything hit the fan, that was a very lonely place. So, I think the answer is, we're all of the above. I mean, when that happened, we did a bunch of, webinars with our portfolio, and we brought, various executives in to kind of help, set the decks. We, famously had, Barry McCarthy, who I mentioned, the former, CFO of Netflix and Spotify, and kind of a remarkable, guru in terms of, operations and also blunt blunt talk. And his point was, if forget about your 2020 plan. It doesn't exist. Like right now, there is no waiting. You have to be a company of action, because a lot of people were saying, oh my God, this sucks, but maybe it's only going to be for a month. Maybe it's only going to be for 2 months. And I think the companies that, acted aggressively, Airbnb being a perfect example, they've been able to take advantage of this on the way out. So look, while we certainly don't relish times of crisis, but I think what you're trying to do in that case is give some broader perspective and actually, the sense of community with other executives, I think was certainly helpful. If for nothing else, it was probably helpful emotionally for folks. But then when you think about, the growth, challenges and opportunities that everybody has, whether it's international, whatever international is for you, depending on where the company's based, whether it's accelerating spend in product and technology and sales and marketing. Well, there's a lot to all of those. There's a lot of tactics. There's a lot of things that you can do right or wrong. And there's a lot of people that have done them correctly. And there's a lot of people that have done them incorrectly. And by the way, sometimes you learn more from the incorrect side. So if you can help somebody get those lessons learned without them, kind of getting their nose bloodied or their knees skinned, like that's upside. So I think the answer is you try to be a little bit of everything. It depends what folks need.
Yeah. You referenced right at the beginning there, Woody, the amount of time that you've been on the scene, as it were, in that very first round. I mean, could you identify what you would consider to be the big pivotal moments during the intervening years for you and the interest that you have in the travel industry? I suspect I know one of them that you're going to say, but are there any other kind of pivotal moments that you could identify?
I think, the first one is, and I was lucky enough, I got into the, venture business, in 1995. So kind of at the beginning of, the commercialization of the, the internet and, just you thought about the possibilities and, the first time just think of the first time that you played around with technology or did something totally new where it was that magical experience, right? The first time you actually booked a flight. By the way, I remember when I started in the, working, we used to get paper tickets, right? Oh, where's my ticket? I can't find my ticket, right?
Yeah.
And think about where you are, today. I mean, by the way, I travel with my kids and I tell them about that. And then they look at me like I'm, like a dinosaur, and they tease me about, every time we see a payphone, I'm like, hey, you guys know what that is? And they're like, yeah, Dad, you've told us that like 1,000 times. Like we know what it is, right? But I think, I think one of the things that gets you captivated early is the value that's created, with new technology. And by the way, travel is something that, everybody does. By the way, in my line of work, I travel a lot for work, and then we also travel, for leisure. It is impactful. And by the way, when you're traveling with your family, something that makes your life easier is that much more interesting. And then, I think the other thing that kind of, can captivate you is being involved with, product-driven founders, right? You look at, that kind of Expedia mafia from, the Rich Bartons and Eric Blatchfords of the world. You look at, and again, for us, it was we invested in Expedia, we invested in Orbitz. When we needed a CEO from Orbitz, we went and got Barney Harford. We've seen the movie before. We know what you need. You bring that same kind of executional capability, but you then work with founders like Brian Sharples at HomeAway and the Brian Chesky's of the world. Like, how can you not be excited about someone that takes something from an idea, nothing, to create what they've created today, to a brand that's recognized, globally. It's, the thing about travel is it's been, it's been a global business, almost from the beginning. And you think about some of the brands that have been created. I just don't know how you can't be excited about what the opportunities are. And by the way, you're still in some cases in the early innings. Yeah, like hotels and flight reservations. Maybe that's already happened. But then you look at something like Hopper, right? By the way, an Expedia alum, that's changing the way that consumers can think about even flights, right? Everybody always said, yeah, flights are it's the milk at the back of the store, it's the Pampers in the back of the Toys R Us, like it's a loss leader, and then you can sell them rent-a-cars and hotels and make your money. And I think, if you look at what, the Fred and the Hopper guys are doing, they've changed the dynamic. And by the way, they're putting the power back into the individual with the financial product, as opposed to, the power being with the supplier. So I think about, here's where we are today: power to the people, the individual, and then also power to the supplier, right? The independent hotel that has been, in many ways, has probably felt that they've been, overly leveraged by the bookings and Expedias and OTAs. There's a lot of solutions that are out there now that are actually putting the power back in the hands of those hotels, and less the big chains, but sometimes the people that run a property for the big chains. But think about the independents. So here we are 26 years after the founding of TCV, where travel might be one of the verticals that we've had the most activity, and you still have this fundamental, whether you want to call it disruption or just the move towards better, faster, cheaper, for a particular constituency. And I just don't know how you can't be excited about it.
Yeah, certainly. Fred Lalonde's presentation at the PhocusWire conference last week got a lot of people very excited. I mean, they really are doing some very interesting things there. So, are you able to identify some lessons, Woody, that you've learned from previous travel companies that you've invested in that you apply to your current cohort?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big one, and I think I talked a little bit about it before, is it's the maniacal focus on the customer, whoever your customer is, and it's the continued innovation around product. Because the point is, if you don't, your position may be fleeting, right? Because somebody else may look and say, you know what, that's a good experience, but it's not a great experience. And what happens if I create a great experience? So, the big one, for me, and I bet, this is consistent with, I think, any business, consumer businesses, because consumer, the vagaries and of the consumer probably happen a little faster than, if you have a enterprise contract, but I think it's all the same, which is, again, if you're not delighting that customer, whatever the definition of delight is for, your solution, there's always the risk that somebody else will. And if they do, that's no longer your customer. Yeah. And I think you need to be, you have to have a constant sense of urgency and be maniacally focused on that.
Yep, good. So as we come towards the end here then, Woody, I mean, it's always a ridiculous question in some respects, but what do you think the future holds? What is game changing? What's coming down the pike? Is it travel or tech related that's going to move the needle? I mean, so many people talk about decentralization and cryptocurrencies and AI and whatever.
Yeah. I mean, again, all of the above. There's so many things that you can get excited about. Think about, travel in general. I think there's, whether you're whatever buzzwords you're going to talk about, right? Like, everybody on the investor slide may have, AI, they may have, the metaverse, they may have crypto, they may have, some sort of, DeFi or, comment or quote there. I think all of those have, can have meaningful impact in travel. I mean, just again, travel is an absolutely massive global business. And even today, there are still tons of inefficiencies, right? Whether you think about the operational process and the management of, if you're an independent hotel, just the things that the travel suppliers do. I mean, again, look, Amadeus and Sabre are massive companies that provide tons of solutions to customers, but those tech stacks are old, right? And if they don't innovate, somebody can innovate for them, right? Which may or may not be good, for them. So I think there's a lot, when again I think about power to the people or power to the the business. Look, think about even something which is not a new story now, but if you look at something like Trip Actions, what did the world think that we needed something new and exciting in corporate travel? And the answer is, when you see something that's so much better than the alternative, everybody says hell yeah. So there are a lot of things that we haven't addressed, but I don't think any travel supplier, any consumer, any participant in this industry is going to be 100% satisfied. It's not like every solution has 100 NPS. So as long as it doesn't, there's an opportunity that exists. And then you think about, there are geographies that, that have not necessarily come into the fold. And if what we're trying to do is make those areas more accessible, there's still the opportunity to, wire up, all of those, new markets. I mean, Asia's still a little bit behind in terms of its, recovery. I think the opportunities in Asia are remarkably exciting, right? Yeah. And again, some of it may be things that others have done historically, but they also have the opportunity to leapfrog some of the solutions that others in different markets have.
Okay. What would you say is your advice for a founder for how best to convey their idea to somebody like you or your other partners within the organization? Is there a magic bullet, as it were?
Well, I mean, again, this is a theme you probably heard. We're very product centric, right?
Yeah.
There's some folks that are going to, be interested. Tell me what your business model is. Let me understand, what the profitability and whatnot are. I'm sure there are people that, looked at Airbnb's remarkable Q3, and the thing that gets them most excited is the 49% EBITDA margin, which, by the way, is exciting and remarkable. But to me, it's kind of the pace of product innovation, right? So I think anybody, depending on what stage, actually irrespective of what stage you're at, is what is the unique value that you're providing for your customer, and conveying your insights, your ability to solve the problem, as well as the ability to kind of continue to iterate and expand on that over time, right? Because to me, I think without that, you may be making a static bet, and then hope that others don't understand your trick or your position and come after you. Because if you don't have that ability to move quickly, especially on the product side, I think that'll be a handicap.
So fewer buzzwords, more focus on the product. I guess
I'm probably less of a buzzwordy, kind of person. I mean, one of the great things about travel is, there is a monetization model. So if you get customer engagement, there are economics to have. You decide how you want to do it. But if you don't have engagement, right? Like this is when I go back to Airbnb. Like when I say it's the only, in my mind, the only real travel app that can be a home screen app. And by the way, there are others that are going to, they're going to try. I mean, we've tried for such a long time to what's a trip planning app? How do you start at the beginning of a trip? Boy, if you could do that, you would own, this market. But Airbnb is one of the few companies that's really been able to captivate, engagement. And you see it in their retention and their organic trends. And I think it's a great, model for others to, emulate, being that, customer centric. But I think that's the important thing.
Okay. And finally then, what advice would you have for companies that are building investing relationships in general? I mean, what are the table stakes right now? We're coming towards the end of 2021. It's been a painful couple of years. What would you say?
First, say, if you have something exciting, give me a call. And then secondly, sorry, I had to do that. Look, if you think about it, now's a great time to start a company. By the way, like even when the travel was, was on its back, that's a perfect time, to rethink things. I mean, Brian Chesky talks about the fact that, when Airbnb was not founded in a time of great prosperity, it was during, the 2008, travails. And that in many ways, that's great, because nobody's going to pay attention to you unless you provide real value. There's no long-term way to just have a simple arbitrage in the market. You have to provide real enduring value. And now's a great time to figure out, what that is, because, it's gut check time, for a lot of travel suppliers. And, that's what I would do. It's a great time to do it. And I think that you'll have a lot of strategic investors that understand, look, travel's not going away. You don't look at 2020 and say, oh, nobody's going to travel again. Maybe it's different, but it is not going away. And there's going to be, the size of the prize is as significant as it was before. Yeah. So now is a great opportunity to, if you think that the world's changing a little bit, this is a time when, incumbents and folk and people that may have been in pole position are weak or at least vulnerable, especially if you move quickly with something that's, that's really, spot on for what the market's looking for. So I wouldn't have the perspective that everybody's like, travel's it's been impacted. We'll see if it grows back. Like, what's it going to look like? No, the thoughtful, travel investors, this is the perfect time to do that. Right. Because by the way, you actually like a situation when other people, think that, there's not a lot of opportunity here. I think Warren Buffett, always says it's the time to be greedy is when others are fearful. Right.
Right. Okay. Woody Marshall, General Partner at TCV. Thank you very much. That was a very inspiring and interesting chat. Appreciate your time.
Great. All right. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.